All right, I am going to walk you through step by step exactly how to knit the Bentley hat pattern, which is a pretty basic knit hat pattern. It's a great hat pattern for first-time hat knitters. It's great for people looking for a foundational hat pattern to do other things like color work or stripes or sew things on top of. So I'm going to be walking you through exactly how to knit this hat from start to finish. So let's just go over exactly what you'll need. I am using 1 skein of Woolly's Thick and Quick yarn. This is the color Slate. You won't be using the entire skein, but if you're going to be knitting the pom using the same color yarn, you're probably going to want to have almost a full skein of yarn. You're going to want to make sure you have my Bentley hat pattern downloaded and printed out or available on a phone or computer nearby, just so you can glance and glance at the pattern and read the pattern as we go along. You are going to need 10 millimeter US 15 16-inch circular knitting needles. We are going to knit the hat in the round. So these needles are great for knitting hats in the round. Again, it's 10 millimeter US 15 16-inch circular knitting needles. You're going to want to need scissors that are really sharp for cutting the pom-pom if you do use the Pom-Pom Maker, or you'll just need scissors to cut the yarn. I've got a tapestry needle here to weave in the ends once we're done, and then we'll need 1 stitch marker to note the beginning and end of the round when we're knitting in the round on the hat. All right, so make sure you've got all of those supplies handy and we will get started. All right, so to get started, we're gonna take a look at our pattern. We're gonna get our needles ready and get our yarn ready. So the pattern does call out a gauge. I just wanna mention what a gauge is. It's basically a way to kind of standardize sizing because everybody knits a little differently. Some people knit tighter, some people knit looser. So gauge here is 9 stitches and 13 rows, should be about 4 inches. So if you knit looser, you'll probably want to grab a size smaller needle. If you grab tighter, you might want to grab a size bigger needles. Basically, it's a way to just standardize sizing to make sure that everyone's hat turns out to be around the same size. So obviously my gauge works well on 10 millimeter needles. Now, I will say lengthwise for knitting hats, you have a little bit of flexibility. You can end the hat you know, a little sooner or a little later if you need to. So hats are a little flexible. You probably just want to make sure your width is about the same so the hat doesn't end up too tight or too loose around your head. So looking at the instructions, they say to cast on 40 stitches using the long tail cast on method. And then we're going to join that in the round, making sure that we're not twisting our stitches, and then we'll need to also place a marker. So let's just first start with casting on 40 stitches using the long tail cast on method. Now, when we use the long tail cast on method, you're going to want to make sure you have a ton of yarn. I'd say probably about 4 feet or so at least of yarn, because you're going to be casting on using this tail. So you have to make sure you have enough for 40 stitches. So I'm going to count off about 4 feet. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just to make sure I have enough yarn to give me 40 stitches here. So we're going to tie a slip knot on our needle, and that'll count as the first stitch. So this is how I make my slip knot. There's lots of different ways to make a slip knot, but I kind of use what I call this pretzel method. I go over the first 2 stitches and under the third, and then I just pull down. And so there I have my first stitch casted on my needles, and I have this long tail on top here and the part attached to the skein down below. So I am going to grab the top part with the long tail in front and the back between the second and third finger, and I'm going to grab everything. So this is how you're going to want to hold the yarn when you're doing a long tail cast on. The tail is on the top around your thumb, and the rest of the skein is between your second and third finger, and then you grab everything down at the bottom. So when we do a long tail cast on, we're going to be moving our wrist back and forth, holding on to the yarn. So the first way, here I'll grab it again, long tail in front, and then the other part of the yarn between the second and third finger, and you're holding it at the bottom. So we're going to move our needle underneath the yarn that's around the thumb, and then we're going to twist our hand around and go over the yarn that's around the index finger and pull through and pull it. You don't want this to be too tight or too loose. If it's really tight, it'll be hard to stretch the brim around your head. If it's too loose, it won't be tight enough. All right, so we're going to keep going here. So we have 2 stitches. This is the third stitch. Under, over, pull through. Third stitch. Under, over, pull through. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. Just do a little check here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 stitches. And we need to keep going to 40. So I'm going to speed it up a little here. All right, so that should be about 40 stitches there. We're just gonna double check. Okay, so yes, we've got 40 stitches. Now when you join in the round, you have to be careful to not twist your stitches. So see how all of my stitches now are kind of laid flat? You want to make sure that you don't have stitches like this and you're joining them like that. You want kind of that bottom part to be all on the inside of your needle so you don't twist your stitches. Now, I'm going to show you a method to join in the round where you actually add on another stitch that the pattern calls for, and then we'll be dropping that stitch as a way to actually connect the hat. So if the pattern calls for 40 stitches, we're going to cast on 41 here. And then I will show you how to join in the round using this method. I've got my stitch marker handy here. All right, so we've got our extra stitch on. Our stitches are not twisted. And I am going to move this last stitch from the left-hand side over to the right-hand needle by slipping it off and moving it on like that, okay? Now we're going to take the last stitch that was on the other needle and we're going to slip that over the stitch we just moved over, okay? Now we're going to drop this stitch and pull it. And then we've joined in the round. Okay? Now you put your marker on to note the beginning and end of round. So when you knit now in the round, this will be your first stitch and this will be your last stitch in the round. And we'll just keep knitting across. All right, so now you're ready to knit the brim in the 1x1 rib. All right, to knit the brim, you're going to be doing a 1x1 rib or a knit 1 purl 1 stitch for 8 rounds. Okay, so we're going to start on the first round. So the instructions say, hat brim, cast on 40 stitches using the long tail cast on method and join in the round, placing a marker and being careful not to twist the stitches. So we did that. Now round 1, it says knit 1, purl 1, repeat from the star to the end. This is the same as 1x1 rib, and we're going to be slipping the marker at the end of the round. So 1x1 rib is simply a knit 1, purl 1, and then we're going to be knitting the knit stitches and purling the purl stitches. So I will show you what this looks like. So we're going to knit the first stitch, pull the yarn in front, and purl the second stitch. So we've got a knit stitch, purl stitch. Move the yarn in the back for knit, knit, purl. Knit, purl. Knit, purl. Knit, purl. And you look back, if you get distracted and you put your work down, you can go back and see the V like this is a knit stitch and the little nub is a purl stitch. So knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. So we know we need to knit next. All right, we're nearing the end here. I have 2 more stitches left. Because we have an even number of stitches and we start with a knit and end with a purl, our last stitch should be a purl. So knit, purl. Purl into the last stitch. So when we get to the end of the round, we're simply going to just slip the marker over to the other needle, and now we know we're finished with round 1, and we're gonna move on to round 2. Now again, to keep track, you're gonna be knitting the knit stitches and purling the purl stitches. So where you see the V in front of you, you know you knit into that stitch. Where you see the nub, you know you purl into that stitch. So we're gonna just start by knitting into the knit stitches. So I've got 2 V's there, and purling into the purl stitch. You can see the two nubs there. And so we do this but this is round 2, so we have to do this through rounds, through round 8. So knitting the knit stitches, purling the purl stitches. Knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. All right, so now you can see, I'm just gonna show you how to count the rows so you can keep track of where you are. So I'm on my 3rd row right now because you can see the 1, 2, 3 V's that I've knitted. So that means I've knitted 3 rows. So I am just finishing up my 3rd row here. And then I will be on my 4th row. So I slip the stitch marker, and then I start knitting the 4th row. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, we have to do this for 8 rounds. All right, so now I am nearing the end of my 8th row of the brim of the knit 1, purl 1, and I'm gonna begin knitting after I finish this 8th row. So let's finish this off and we'll count just to make sure. We'll show you how to count. All right, so you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rows completed. And now the pattern just says round 9, knit to the end, slip marker. So we're gonna, and then repeat this round until the hat measures 8.5 inches. So we're gonna slip the marker and begin the next round. And all we're gonna do from now on is knit. So we just begin knitting all the way across. All right, so I'm nearing the end of the first knitted round. I'm gonna knit to the end, slip the marker, and begin the next round, and just continue knitting all the way across. And you can start to see that we're done with the ribbing, and we're just doing stockinette stitch. So you're gonna continue knitting in the round like this until the whole hat measures 8.5 inches from the cast on edge. So when the whole hat measures 8.5 inches, then we'll work the decrease. But for now, let's just keep knitting. a good way to think about it too is, so I am on 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. I am on row 19 right now. And we know the gauge is 9 stitches and 13 rows is 4 inches, and we have to get to 8.5 inches. So we know it's probably about 26 rows, or rounds, I should say, to get to 8.5 inches. So if I'm on 19, I have only about, what did I say? If I'm gonna knit 28 rows and I'm on 19, I only have 9 more rounds left to knit. So that's just a good way to kind of figure out. You can use your gauge to kind of figure out how many rounds you'll need to knit to get to 8.5 inches. All right, so I am finishing the 28th row here, and then I will measure to make sure it's about 8.5 inches long. Now, if you want the hat to be a little slouchier or even a little more snug, you can change the length. If you want it slouchier, you can go longer. If you want it tighter fitting, you can go shorter, but you can actually kind of try it on as you go to see. So let's check here. We're at about 8.5 inches here. So now we're gonna refer back to our pattern, and it says, let's see here, repeat round 9 until hat measures 8.5 inches, which we did, and now we're gonna decrease for the crown. So it says next round, knit 2 together, and we're gonna repeat the knit 2 together all the way to the end. So we decrease the number of stitches to a total number of 20 stitches. All right, so this is what it looks like to decrease, to knit 2 together. All right, I'm gonna slip the marker, and then to knit 2 together, instead of knitting 1 stitch, I'm gonna go into 2 stitches at the same time and treat them like 1. Okay, so now we've got 2 stitches in 1. I'll show you what that looks like again. Put your put your needle in between 2 stitches there at the same time, yarn over and pull through. So we've gone from 4 stitches to 2 stitches now. This starts to help close the gap at the crown of the head. And you'll see with different hats, they decrease differently. This kind of hat is a little slouchier at the top as far as the decreases go. This is kind of a beginner friendly hat pattern, so I didn't do too many like crazy or fancy decreases, but this is a fine way to decrease and it'll still look great. So we're just going to keep doing this. Knit 2 together all the way across here. All right, we're nearing the end here. See my stitch marker. Now we are done with that round. So we should have decreased from 40 stitches to 20 stitches. All right, for our final round, we're gonna cut about an 8-inch tail off the end of the yarn here. And you can use a tapestry needle like this to weave in the ends of your yarn. Okay, so now basically we're just going to seam up the top of the head. I'm going to slip the stitch marker off, and I'm basically going to take each stitch on the needle and slide it off and onto this needle. And this is still connected to the hat back here, and I'll show you what we do here. So we're going to get all these stitches off the knitting needle and onto the string. Okay, so now I can simply pull the hat together and close up the top. And I'm gonna slip it on the inside, and we're gonna attach a pom. I'm gonna show you how to make a pom-pom using a pom-pom maker here. All right, so I'm going to show you how to use the pom-pom maker now to make a yarn pom-pom. Now the pom-pom maker opens and closes, and it kind of looks like a little funny thing. But when we start, we're going to open up one side, and we're going to start wrapping the yarn all the way around. We want to end with the yarn here, so when we close it, it's close to this side. And we can wrap the yarn around and close it here. So I will show you how to do that. All right, so we're gonna open up the pom here, pom maker, and we're gonna start, excuse me, wrapping the yarn around here. And it can be a little awkward, but you just do your best. You can kind of leave that string in here, and I'm gonna really make it thick. So kind of starting on this side a little bit, wrapping it around a lot, because the more you wrap it around, the bulkier and cuter, in my opinion, the pom-pom will be. So you keep going. You wrap it around a lot of times. Okay, so that's looking pretty good here. I've wrapped it around a lot. I'm towards the end here. Now we're gonna close this, pull the yarn through this little section here, and open this side up, and just continue wrapping the yarn around like we did on the other side. Making sure it's the same kind of thickness. There's lots of different ways to make pom-poms. I just like the look of the pom with the pom-pom maker. It's just a little bit more even, a little fluffier. All right. All right, so now we're gonna close this up. I'm going to wrap this in here, close it up, make sure it's snapped closed. Okay, and then we're gonna take our scissors and cut in between all the way around. You have to make sure you have really sharp scissors. There, it wasn't snapping. Okay, so I've snapped it, and now I'm gonna cut all the way around. And having sharp fabric scissors really helps make this a little easier. Mine are probably even a little dull, but you can really get in there. And you want to cut and put your scissors kind of in the center here, so that helps make the yarn a little more even. All right. And keep cutting, making sure that this doesn't open up. You can kind of hold it down while you cut here. All right, so now we're going to cut off the end there. I'm going to cut another piece of yarn. Probably, I did this a little long, probably about a foot or so. I just like to make sure I have lots of a yarn. And we're going to wrap this yarn through the entire center of the pom. And this is what's going to hold it all together. Okay, so this yarn goes in the center, make sure it's kind of even. And then you're gonna tie a knot, a really tight knot. And you have to make sure it goes all the way down into the center there. Tie it tight, so make sure you pull it as hard as you can. And then I usually tie at least 2 more knots. Okay, and now we've secured the pom, and we can open this up. It's easier said than done. And slide it off. And now you've got your pom-pom. And usually it comes out pretty even from the Pom-Pom Maker, but if you want, you can trim it a little bit to make sure it's perfect. But now I will show you how to attach it to your hat. So, you know what, I'm gonna cut this guy off. That was our extra. Okay, so we have our 2 pieces of yarn from when we tied the yarn around after we cut the pom. But now we've got the piece of yarn sticking out from when we pulled the crown of the hat together. I usually just kind of stick that inside the hat, and then I take these 2 ends from the pom and stick them on the outside of that circle and just kind of push them in. So there's one on one side. Here's one on the other side. Okay. And then turn the hat kind of inside out so you can see the inside. And it's kind of open still in there, but when we really pull everything together and knot it, it'll come together. I'm just pulling that seam. These are the 2 strings from the pom-pom, and here's the string from the seam. And I usually just tie a knot. And I do it a few times just to make sure it's really secure. Then I will cut these off. And then you're gonna wanna take the tapestry needle and weave in the ends from your cast on, and you can weave in the ends of the knot, but you are now done with the hat. So to weave in the ends, I usually just take the needle and go back and forth along one of the sides of the rib stitching here. And this just helps to keep the hat secure at the end. I just weave it up along the side so it kind of blends in. Until I get all the way to the top. And I'll just go one more time. And cut this off. And there you've got it.